Behold, the MIZUTSUNE builds are here in Monster Hunter Wilds, and I have 7 of them for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Terra Knights, what's up, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Now, the MIZUTSUNE builds don't technically deal the most amount of damage in Monster Hunter Wilds compared to some of the endgame weapons and builds that we have, especially with the arrival of Zoshia along with MIZUTSUNE. Well, what if I told you there's a lot more going on with MIZUTSUNE than meets the eye? Well, that's exactly why we're going to look at 7 different MIZUTSUNE builds today. Some builds for weapons that make great use out of elemental damage, and even some weapons like the Greatsword and the Hammer, which are better for raw damage. However, I have cooked up some builds for you in case you do want to use a Water Greatsword, because as I said, there are actually a few different skills going on behind the scenes with the MIZUTSUNE that actually can lend to a playstyle where you would want to use the MIZUTSUNE Greatsword and the MIZUTSUNE armor itself. But first, I do want to make a couple things clear with these builds. First and foremost, I don't prioritize builds that are only strictly meta builds or something that like a speedrunner uses, for instance. I'm a Monster Hunter veteran, but that doesn't mean that I just go for the top DPS in the game. No, rather, there's a lot of skills in Monster Hunter that a lot of folks do not make use out of. And so these builds are going to highlight why some of the MIZUTSUNE armor is actually so good in the first place, especially amongst weapons that aren't typically good with elemental damage. And so with those ideas in mind, that the MIZUTSUNE is situational depending on your playstyle, the reality is you clicked on this video because you probably want to use the MIZUTSUNE armor and the weapons. And so lastly, I will say that while these aren't meta, these definitely are some extremely strong builds that you actually would want over meta builds sometimes. But finally, the build doesn't change too much with the armor setup that we do have amongst all 7 weapons in this video. So to understand how the MIZUTSUNE armor works and the weapon works itself with the inherent weapon skill that comes on every single MIZUTSUNE weapon, you're going to want to watch the first build in this guide coming up in a second here so that you can understand how all of the builds work. I'll be explaining every single skill in that first build. So if you do want to skip to another weapon build and I don't go over some particular skills that you may need to know about, I will have timestamps listed on the video specifically so that you can jump to the part that you need to know about. Our first build that we have today is a bow and a dual blades build combined into one. Now we're going to talk about the weapons last. We're going to go through the armor pieces first, but the first thing to note is that we are going to be using 4 pieces of MIZUTSUNE armor. Now typically in my build videos, I do go into skills later on when we get to the actual decorations and stuff. However, it's important to understand why we're going to be using 4 pieces of MIZUTSUNE for every single weapon and build that we have in this video. So let's quickly take a look under the skill info right now. MIZUTSUNE's prowess Bubbly Dance 1 prevents major bubble blight and increases evasion while afflicted with minor bubble blight. So Bubbly Dance 1 isn't really much to look at by itself, unfortunately. Not really the best skill if you're going for the 2-piece armor, unless you were fighting MIZUTSUNE specifically, I suppose. So taking a look at the Bubbly Dance 2, Bubbly Dance 2 prevents major bubble blight completely and ups evasion while you're afflicted. Trigger minor bubble blight by evading many times. This armor, depending on how many times you evade, which is typically around 3 evades, and certain stamina usage moves with certain weapons that we're going to go over later as well. Because of that, this armor set allows us to afflict ourselves with bubble blight, which gives us a big evasion buff. So already the MIZUTSUNE armor has some extremely great uses when you're using the 4-piece set. And next, let's take a look at just one MIZUTSUNE weapon so that you can understand why the MIZUTSUNE weapons and the armor go together so well. Let's take a look at the dual blades. The dual blades come with the equipment skill in the bottom right, Slicked Blade level 3, as well as critical element level 1. Slicked Blade is a MIZUTSUNE exclusive skill on the MIZUTSUNE weapons, and it comes on every single MIZUTSUNE weapon that you're going to see. So if we scroll up above to the Heaven's Mana, you're also going to see the Slicked Blade in the bottom right. Well, let's take a look at what it does now. Slicked Blade temporarily increases your affinity when wet or when afflicted with bubble blight. At level 3, we get affinity +9 when wet and +21% while afflicted with bubble blight. So this is an armor set that allows us to inflict ourselves with bubble blight while preventing major bubble blight, which gets us extra evasion when we do have it induced. And on top of that, we get 21% while we are afflicted with that bubble blight. And that's why these weapons and these armor really go together very well, and you can get some really awesome builds going because we get so much affinity out of the weapon and the armor itself that simply would not work unless we were using both the 4-piece armor and a MIZUTSUNE weapon. But that's not all. The Evening Dusk, the dual blades, on the right side under the equipment info, we have a solid true raw damage of 210, which is extremely great. We also have 15% affinity across all MIZUTSUNE weapons, and MIZUTSUNE weapons all come with water ailment themselves. Not only this, but we have a great chunk of white sharpness, which is the best damage multiplier that you can get out of your sharpness gauge with any weapon in Monster Hunter, but it also comes with a level 3, a level 2, and a level 1 decoration slot. Whether you're using them for the water ailment or not, you cannot deny that the damage on this thing is absolutely insane, with that 15% affinity already to boot, with a decent amount of raw damage as well, and a huge chunk of white sharpness. So for the 15% affinity being universal on the MIZUTSUNE weapons, combined with the Slick Blade weapon skill, which gets us 21% affinity when we do trigger Bubble Blight on ourselves, what this means is that when we're using this armor set right and the weapons right, we have 36% affinity practically universally across all weapons. But it also comes with great evasion when we're afflicted with the Bubble Blight itself. But truth be told, that is not all that these MIZUTSUNE builds do as well. We do have some extra benefits that allow us to get even more elemental damage out of these weapons in these builds because of some of the pieces of the MIZUTSUNE that we're using. But now that we have the idea of how these builds work out of the way, let's talk about this first build with the bow and the dual blades so that we can get on to what a full build actually looks like. MIZUTSUNE Greaves come with a level 3 decoration and the burst skill in level 2. The waist comes with Constitution level 2, which is a great stamina skill, but the waist also comes with a level 3, a level 2, and a level 1 decoration slot. So the waist is an extremely great piece by itself when we're going to be cooking up some other builds in the future on the channel. Next we have the MIZUTSUNE braces. The arms comes with a level 3 decoration slot, also comes with Evade Window level 2 and Evade Extender level 1. This is also a great armor piece by itself. Next up in the chest, we do have Constitution level 1 and Burst coming in again at level 1 with 2 level 2 decoration slots. And finally, we have the Gore Magala helm to piece it all off with a level 3 decoration slot and a level 1. The Gore helm also comes with some evade window, which helps complement the build even further. And we also have a point of coalescence on the Gore helm as well. Coalescence is actually an extremely handy skill that we're going to build around for most of these builds, as you're going to see. For the charm, we are using the Exploiter Charm 2, which does get us Weakness Exploit level 2. And the mantle of choice for most of these builds is actually very flexible. The mantles really don't matter too much in Monster Hunter Wilds. However, on this build with the dual blades and the bow, seeing as they are very evasive weapons, I've chosen the evasion mantle on this build personally. Now that we've gone over the equipment, here's the decorations page. We're going to go over all the skills that we get out of these decorations though, just to make it a little bit quicker and to not have this video drag on. So if you need to see these decorations, pause the YouTube video now or just take a screenshot. But moving on from there, let's get onto the bow build first with the Heaven's Mana. As we talked about before, we have the Slick Blade, which increases our affinity by 21% while afflicted with Bubble Blight, which is triggerable ourselves because of the MIZUTSUNE's prowess, as we talked about before. By wearing 4 pieces of MIZUTSUNE, we can give ourselves Bubble Blight, which not only gets us that 21% affinity from the weapon itself, however, we also get a great evasion buff as well just because we are afflicted with it. So now moving on from some of the decorations we have, we also have Water Attack level 3. Water Attack plus 20% plus a bonus 60 water element damage on top of that. This one's actually a no-brainer, which leads us to 280 water element all the way on the right side of the screen, as you can see. Down below that, we have Critical Element level 1, which is coming from the MIZUTSUNE weapon itself, slightly increases elemental damage while active, and that is when you are landing a critical hit, as that is how Critical Element works. The next skill we have is Spread Power Shots. This is coming from a spread jewel in the bow itself, slightly increases the power of specified ammo and arrows. Specifically, this does increase the damage that you are getting from your power shots with your bow. Not the typical trigger presses if you're using a controller, but the actual B button or the circle button, depending on your controller presses. This is an extremely great decoration that you're going to want on pretty much any bow build in Monster Hunter Wilds. Weakness Exploit increases the affinity of attacks that exploit a monster's weak points and wounds. At level 5, attacks that hit weak points have 30% increased affinity with an extra 20% on wounds. So when we are getting the most bang for our buck with the skill, that means that we're getting 50% affinity, plus the 15% from the weapon itself of MIZUTSUNE gets us 65% affinity. And as we talked about before, inflicting yourselves with Bubble Blight gets us 21% affinity if we are using a weapon with Slicked Blade. leading to 86% affinity, which is absolutely insane. And so filling out weakness exploit does truly allow us to build some other decorations that don't necessarily go toward affinity, but into some more comfort skills or some skills that you might want to have, which actually might get you more DPS in the long run using this build that isn't technically meta. Next, we have Constitution level 5, reduces stamina depletion when evading, blocking, or doing certain other actions. At level 5, reduces it by 50%. This is a great skill for both the bow and the dual blades, as those both are very stamina hungry weapons. We also have Burst level 3, continuously landing hits, gradually increases attack and also elemental attack. The dual blades in the bow make extremely great use out of Burst because the dual blades is a fast hitting weapon, but the bow also puts out multiple arrows at a time, which quickly gets us our burst. Next, we have Evade window level 3, extends the invulnerability period when evading. At level 3, increases the invulnerability window at a moderate rate. And next we have Coalescence level 3. The Coalescence, as you remember, did come from the Gore Magella helm that we did talk about. However, we did slot in 2 Phoenix jewels on the chest piece of this armor set, which helped us to build out the level 3 of this skill. Coalescence temporarily increases elemental attack power and status effects after recovering from blights or abnormal status. At level 3, it grants a large increase to the damage that you're doing. The reason why Coalescence is so good on this armor and this weapon set for the MIZUTSUNE itself is because Bubble Blight does count as one of the blights that it's referring to. So not only can we get us Bubble Blight to get us extra evasion and affinity because of the Slicked Blade weapon skill, but after it ends, we also activate Coalescence. From there, we can activate Bubble Blight once more to have Bubble Blight and Coalescence stacked to get us a lot of elemental damage on these weapons, ladies and gentlemen. Coalescence is an extremely strong skill, and we have it in here for a very particular reason, as you can see. Stamina Surge simply speeds up stamina recovery. At level 2, increases it by a whole 30%, which is absolutely amazing for the bow and the dual blades. And that's pretty much it. We do have Evade Extender level 1, but that is just coming from the Van Braces that you saw before, which increases our evade distance. But this is more or less just an extra skill that we have, although I am a big advocate for Evade Extender. I love this skill. Now, there is actually one more skill that we do need to talk about and that you are going to need to be aware of when you are using MIZUTSUNE armor. That is the Alluring Pelt group skill. Increases the attention drawn to you when attacking a monster. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your skill level and how you actually use this armor, you're going to get targeted more often when you are using this. However, remember that we do get extra evasion when we are using the MIZUTSUNE Bubble Blight. Because of this, it does help you get the Bubble Blight more often because you are going to have to be dodging some attacks. But dodging some attacks with the dual blades and the bow specifically actually lends you to get more damage, as those both have perfect evades. Now, that's pretty much all of the skills when we are taking a look at the bow. Now we just need to finish up the dual blades portion by highlighting the dual blades themselves and also taking a look at the skill info. As you can see on the dual blades, we do have the Slick Blade level 3 that does come from the dual blades itself. We also have Water Attack level 3, as we are using a Stream Focus Jewel in the top of the dual blades, which allows us to get our water attack up by 20% as well as a bonus 60, which also lends to us getting 288 water damage. But we also have Critical Element level 3 on this as well. Because we did have to use the spread decoration in the bow up above, we don't have to use that on the dual blades, so we are able to slot in a level 2 decoration for Critical Element, which did finish out our Critical Element at level 3, as the weapon already comes with 1 level inherently. At level 3, greatly increases elemental damage while active, and since we already talked about having 86% affinity on this build, this means that we're going to be critting a ton, so this is extremely great for the dual blades, which is the elemental king of the weapons in the Monster Hunter series. Next up, we have Razor Sharp Jewel 1. Razor Sharp grants a 10% chance of no sharpness loss. Now, this doesn't really seem like very much on the dual blades. However, I would beg to differ, as you are getting a lot of little hits in with the dual blades, which gives you an extra chance to actually proc this skill, especially because we do have 1 decoration slot left over. Razor Sharp is not actually to be underestimated. Obviously, it would be the best at level 3, but we'll take the level 1 just because we can. Now, that's going to wrap up both the bow and the dual blades all in one go. The stamina skills really do lend to both the bow and the dual blades respectively, but only specifically because they both use a lot of stamina in the moveset themselves. But to cap this one off, this is the ultimate water elemental build in Monster Hunter Wilds. If you need to fight a monster that is weak to water element and you are very familiar with using the dual blades or the bow or even just one of these weapons, this is definitely the build to absolutely shred water weak monsters, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's take a look at a MIZUTSUNE Great Sword build, as well as Sword and Shield in here as well. But the Great Sword is actually not to be trifled with. This is an amazing Great Sword, and you're going to see why in just a second, ladies and gentlemen. So strong is this Great Sword, and yes, a lot of people might crap on elemental damage with Great Swords. It is true that the Great Swords do deal way more raw damage. However, building the MIZUTSUNE Great Sword does have its own benefits, as you're going to see. So now let's take a look at it. The Great Sword, Akane Sasu. The exact same thing is going on here with the Great Sword as the dual blades and the bow. But to reiterate, we do have the Slicked Blade equipment skill level 3, as well as critical element level 1. We have a great chunk of white sharpness. We have 210 raw non-coefficient damage on the weapon itself, as well as a universal 15% affinity. It also comes with a level 3, 2, and 1 decoration slot. Now, as you can see from before, we are using the Gore helm, but we are also using 4 pieces of MIZUTSUNE on the chest, band braces, waist, and legs, just like the last build. We are still also using the Exploiter charm, so there's not really a whole lot to go over here. For the mantle of choice, you can use whatever you want. Taking a look at the decorations on this one, this is what we have cooked up for this build specifically with Greatsword, which is different if you'll notice when we are lacking some of those stamina decorations that we did have in the bow and the dual blades. But taking a look at the skill info itself as we get into it. Now, we went over it before, but we do have the Slicked Blade, which gets us 21% affinity while afflicted with Bubble Blight. So for those who have skipped to this part of the video and missed it in the dual blades and the bow, we get 21% affinity from the weapon itself. Combine this with the 15% affinity on the weapon itself gets us 36% affinity. So moving on, we also have water attack level 3 as well on our Greatsword, which may not seem the best for Greatsword. Typically, you want to build mostly raw damage. However, I did have a stream focus jewel decoration. And since I am such a focus enjoyer on Greatsword, I truly did want to go all out on the water element damage on this build. At level 3, our water attack is plus 20%, and we do get a bonus 60, but we also get a point of focus as well. We also have a level 2 decoration of focus, which does round out our focus to level 3, increases the gauge fill rate of weapons that do have gauges, but for Greatsword specifically, reduces the charge times by 15%. This works with all of our Greatsword charge swings, and so as you can see, getting the focus level 3 is extremely important on Greatsword. However, if you did want to, you could actually swap out this level 3 jewel for anything else that does help you get extra damage on your Greatsword. One of the main things being, if you do want to sacrifice some of your focus, you do straight up just want to put in critical boost, especially when it comes in a critical jewel level 3 to get you some extra damage from the raw damage that you are getting on the Greatsword with all the affinity that we do have cooked into this build. So this is subjective to whether you want to hit faster with your Greatsword with focus level 3, or you do want to sacrifice that for the critical jewel level 3. Truth be told, it is probably better to slot in the critical boost here. However, I am stubborn and I like my focus, ladies and gentlemen. But moving on, we do have a critical jewel 1, which does get us critical boost as one tiny little decoration in the last part of the Greatsword, which gets us our critical damage buff from 25 to 28% damage. And of course, the next skill, critical element, does come on the Greatsword itself, increases elemental damage when landing critical hits. Next, as we already did mention in the last build, we do have weakness exploit level 5. At level 5, increase our affinity by 30% with an extra 20% on wounds, leading to 50% affinity. Combine that with the 15% on the weapon itself, gets us 65, and the Slicked Blade Bubble Blight skill proc as well gets us all the way up to 86%. If you did skip the last build, that is how this works exactly, ladies and gentlemen. We get a total 86% affinity because of all the combined armor and weapons that we are using. Next, we also have Constitution level 3, reduces fixed stamina depletion by 30% when blocking, evading, or doing certain other actions. Not exactly the best skill on the Greatsword, however, there is no wasted skill in Monster Hunter, ladies and gentlemen, especially because we do have to evade multiple times to get our own Bubble Blight activated, because we are trying to get into position with the Greatsword a lot of the time. If a monster slightly moves away, we want to roll a few times, maybe get our Bubble Blight activated, but we can also go into a tackle straight out of the roll. Constitution actually is a great skill to have on this build specifically. Next, again, we do have Burst level 3, hit 5 successive times for a bigger stat boost. Burst is actually very easily activated on the Greatsword, despite what people may tell you because it is a slower weapon. Using certain attacks like the Greatsword focus attack, even if you're not actually hitting a wound, It hits multiple times as it is dragging along monsters. This helps you get your burst activated, but you can just land the successive attacks yourself, which does lead to you getting bigger attack and elemental attack. Next, we do have Evade Window again, which is just a very nice skill to have on any build specifically. We do finish off the Coalescence with some Phoenix Jewels in the chest plate, which does grant us a large increase to elemental damage when we do recover from our Bubble Blight. You will not see me build any of these MIZUTSUNE builds without this skill. This skill is extremely important to the Bubble Blight playstyle. Next, we do have Earplugs level 2. We're not building for stamina a lot this time, and if you do not know, in Monster Hunter Wilds, Earplugs 2 is typically the only amount of earplugs that you need for most monsters in the game. There are a few exceptions to monsters like Gore Magala, Gravios, and even Zoshia, with some roars that you do need Earplugs 3 to actually get through. However, because you can tackle through some roars, you could just do that in those certain situations, and for all the situations that don't actually require Earplugs level 3, you're good to just sit there and charge your Greatsword, which gets you extra damage in the long run and can really help you land those big satisfying hits. Evade Extender is again here just because we are using the Van Braces, just from the last build of course. We also have an Adaptability Jewel slotted into the waist. This can actually be swapped out for anything of your choosing, but this does grant protection against environmental damage such as heat or cold. We also have Shock Absorber specifically as well. This is more for the Sword and Shield part of this build, but disables damage reactions when you hit a friend or when a friend hits you. It doesn't need to be stated why Shock Absorber is really good, especially for multiplayer. Friendly fire always sucks in Monster Hunter, honestly. And so I typically have the shock-proof decoration slotted in pretty much all of my builds. And that pretty much does it for the Greatsword. Now let's take a look at the Sword and Shield specifically. The Sword and Shield is again coming with the Slicked Blade level 3. Coming from a decoration, the Stream Guardian Jewel level 3, which gets us level 3 water attack all by itself, but also gets us 1 point of offensive guard. Offensive guard temporarily increases our attack power after executing a perfectly timed guard, an extra 5% while it's activated. Because you can block at a moment's notice, offensive guard is a really nice skill to have on the Sword and Shield. And up above that though, we do have critical element level 3. We do get 1 point from the weapon itself because it is a MIZUTSUNE weapon, and that is very universal, but we have a critical element jewel decoration slotted in on the Sword and Shield. Next, we also have guard up as a level 1 decoration on the sword as well. Allows you to guard against ordinarily unblockable attacks. There aren't a lot of unblockable attacks in Monster Hunter Wilds, but this isn't the only reason why you'd want guard up, because at level 1, it does reduce the damage that you take by 30%, which is a huge chunk of damage to resist. So it's a nice little extra decoration to slot in your Sword and Shield. However, you could slot in any decoration that you want, but I do like the offensive guard and the guard up playstyle. And now that's going to wrap up the Greatsword and the Sword and Shield, ladies and gentlemen. And now moving on from the Greatsword, we are going to take a look at a light bowgun build specifically. I did pair the dual blades with it just because it did seem to slot in a bit better than the bow, as the bow is a lot more stamina hungry than the dual blades. The dual blades can be used without some of the stamina skills that we do need. So this is truly about using the Mizu light bowgun itself. Again, if you did skip to this part of the video, you might want to take a look at one of the first builds that we did make, as we did cover what all of these weapons and these armor pieces do specifically. So to make this easier for people who've watched through the entire video, we're going to take a look at the decorations itself. So pause the YouTube video, take a screenshot to get a good look at these decorations. So the light bowgun build is actually extremely similar to everything else that we're using before, as we do need to use the 4 pieces of MIZUTSUNE, so a lot of the skills are the same. And so I am going to go over some of the skills that have changed with the light bowgun specifically to turn this into a ranged water monster. First off, we are using the Opener Stream Jewel on the light bowgun. The Opener Stream Jewel gets us opening shot level 3. Opening shot, first off, does increase the bowgun's reload speed and increase the power of bullets when fully loaded. At level 3, it greatly increases the reload speed and attack power of the ammo when it is fully loaded, getting us extra damage on every single one of our opening shots with each of our clips. We also have a Bandolier Jewel in the light bowgun itself, which gets us Tetrad Shot. Now, Tetrad Shot is a very interesting skill in Monster Hunter, and I am going to need to talk about this a little bit further in depth with this light bowgun itself. But first off, Tetrad Shot says that it increases affinity of bowgun ammo from the 4th shot and the attack of the 4th and 6th shots. At level 1, it slightly increases the attack power and affinity of ammo after certain conditions are met. Now, this skill is very confusing on paper. What this means is that the 4th shot out of that entire clip is going to get that extra affinity and damage, as well as the 6th and final shot. Now, if we take a look at the light bowgun capabilities itself, this light bowgun is actually pretty decent for Pierce ammo at a level 2. We also have a Pierce ammo magazine and an elemental boost magazine as well. The Elemental Boost magazine for the customizations of the Bowgun gets us an extra shot on our elemental ammo clips. Scrolling over to the ammo that we can see and use ourselves, it is capable of rapid fire on the Pierce ammo and the water ammo specifically. And the water ammo is the only element that we can actually use, but it does come in at a level 2, and it does have 6 capacity on it as well. This means that the Pierce ammo and the water ammo are both a perfect ammo type for Tetrad shot. A quick little demonstration of how it works, because we are able to use the chaser shot after any typical shot with our light bowgun, pressing the circle or the B button gets us extra damage and all that, of course. And so the best way to make use of the Tetrad shot on the light bowgun real quick, especially as it is going to amplify our water ammo because we do have skills like critical element inherent on the weapon itself, we want to make sure to use the chaser shot on the 4th and the 6th shots. So you can use all of your ammo, but make sure to use the chaser on the 4th, and again on the 6th shot. The same thing does still apply on the rapid fire energy. And that's why Tetrad shot is extremely important on pretty much any bowgun that you want to use, actually, light or heavy. Now, coming into a difference in this build compared to all the other builds that we've already covered, is we do have evade window level 4 instead of level 3, which greatly increases the invulnerability window. We're not actually using earplugs on this build itself specifically, because the light bowgun is such an evasive weapon. It does mean that you trigger your bubble blight even faster using this weapon, kind of like the dual blades and the bow. We would be using evade window on those, except those weapons need more stamina in them. And finally, the only difference in this build compared to all the other builds that we have covered already is we do have Adrenaline Rush level 1 coming from the counterattack jewel in the helm piece itself. Having the extra evade window on this build specifically, especially because we are dodging around with the light bowgun and being very evasive, temporarily increases the attack power after executing a perfectly timed evade just as a monster attacks, getting us a raw attack value of 10. So our evades are going to be extremely easy with a level 4 evade window, and even if you combine it with something like the evasion mantle, you are going to get a lot of damage on this build, ladies and gentlemen. This is an extremely strong water light bowgun build that you're really going to love, and quite frankly probably is actually meta when it does come to elemental damage. Now let's take a look at a hammer. Yes, you heard it right, ladies and gentlemen. The hammer, the Mizu hammer, is a real build in Monster Hunter that I cooked up, and it is for a very, very good reason that is tied to the weapon itself. So taking a look at the hammer's decorations, here it is. Pause the YouTube video once again, or take a screenshot for your decoration needs. For anybody who skipped to this part of the video, we did already go over it in a lot of the other builds in this video already. So for reference, if you do need to know what most of these skills do, go take a look at the first build that we did cover in this video guide so that you can understand how it works. But with that out of the way, let's talk about what is different with the hammer and the decorations that we have chosen, as well as why we're not actually focusing on water this time around. The first decoration that we are using is a focus jewel, getting us focus level 3. At level 3 increases the gauge fill rate for weapons that use gauges, but also reduces the charge times of weapons by 15%. And yes, this does help on all of your mighty swings as well, ladies and gentlemen. This skill is kind of a no-brainer on pretty much any hammer build that I'm ever typically using. You can use the charge step to bypass a lot of the hammer charge levels that you are trying to get, but honestly, I really do just use focus jewel level 3 specifically for the mighty charge, as that is where all of your really, really good damage is with the mighty slam with the hammer. And so while focus jewel is a little bit contradictory to the charge step when you are typically charging your hammer, it definitely comes in way handier when you are in the mighty charge state. Now, we're not focusing on water attack this time around, as you do get more damage out of the hammer with something like a critical jewel level 2, which gets us critical boost level 2, which increases our damage dealt all the way up to 31%. And for the final decoration, we are using a knockout jewel in the hammer as well, which gets us slugger level 1. Makes it easier to stun monsters. And if you are a new player or unaware of the slugger skill, at level 1, it gets us an extra 20% stun power. Now, at level 2 and 3, you can go from 20 to 30 to 40. However, you will note that getting just 1 point of this skill gets you the most bang for your buck, as you get a whole 20%, and it only increases from 10 and 10 again from there. So as I said before, the 1 point of slugger, most bang for your buck. Now, truth be told, this build is exactly identical to the greatsword and the sword and shield build as well. All the decorations are the same and all of the skills are the same, ladies and gentlemen. However, if it does need to be stated, you could take out the earplug jewels in the helm as well as the waist to get in some extra decorations that you might want instead. You can use the charge step to actually get through a lot of roars in Monster Hunter Wilds. However, I love earplugs level 2. It is such a comfort skill. Now, you may be thinking after looking at that build that using the hammer probably doesn't seem very good compared to meta builds. However, there is a very specific reason, as I did talk about before. Not only does this armor set come with Constitution, it also comes with Evade window. And if you do not know, the charge step does have iframes on it as well. All of this combined has a lot of synergy, but what you may not know is that the charge step does count as an evade movement, which does help you get your bubble blight active. And there it's activated just like that, ladies and gentlemen. And so that is why the hammer is actually a super solid build for the MIZUTSUNE in Monster Hunter Wilds, utilizing the new charge step in Monster Hunter Wilds to get the bubble blight active for a huge affinity buff, as well as being able to slot in comfortable skills like earplugs truly does bring the hammer build for MIZUTSUNE to life. Now, finally, let's talk about our MIZUTSUNE Insect Glaive build. So first off, here's the decorations page. You'll actually notice that this is exactly similar to the hammer and the greatsword and sword and shield build as well, but there is something interesting to note that is inherent with the Insect Glaive itself with its Kinsect buffs. But we're going to talk about that in a second here. So again, pause the YouTube video, take a screenshot for the decoration needs that you may have. But going into the skills, we are going to take a look at only what is different on this build compared to the others. Go take a look at the first build of this video if you did skip to this point to understand how these skills work. But going into what is different here, we do have a stream enhancer decoration, which gets us our water attack level 3 in the top part of the Insect Glaive. We also do have power prolonger level 1, moderately boost the duration weapons are powered up for. This does work with our Kinsect buffs. However, power prolonger isn't actually something that I really advocate for on Insect Glaive these days when you are good at using the rising spiral slash. However, if you are not good at using that and getting all your buffs back, power prolonger could be something that you advocate for, especially for new players who do want to stay in the buff mode of Insect Glaive the longest time possible. In my case, I used the stream enhancer jewel just because it did come with power prolonger and level 3 water as well, as that is the best decoration that I could find that does fit the Insect Glaive. Next up, and most importantly, we have the flight jewel level 2, which does get us airborne level 1, and it only comes in level 1, ladies and gentlemen. Increases the damage caused by jumping attacks by 10%. This works with all of your aerial combat with the Insect Glaive, but interestingly enough, as you may be aware, if you are a Insect Glaive user, when you do have the red buff and you do the descending slash the charged attack with the Insect Glaive, you can do that from the air, but you can also do it from the ground. What you may not know is that from the ground, this 10% does actually add to it, even if you are not in mid-air, as that weapon attack does have mid-air properties even when started from the ground. So airborne is a no-brainer skill to have on any Insect Glaive build, not even just this MIZUTSUNE one, ladies and gentlemen. So next, let's finally talk about our last decoration, which is just a critical element jewel level 1, which does boost our critical element up to level 2. As you already know, we do get critical element 1 from the weapon itself. Now that is actually all that's different with the Insect Glaive build itself. However, there is something important to note about how the Insect Glaive works when it does come to using a MIZUTSUNE build specifically. Now, if you watch the hammer part of this guide or have watched through pretty much most of this guide, any evade tactic that you're going to use with any weapon helps you to get bubble blight. So normally you would get it by rolling around, but what you may not know is that you actually can get it from mid-air as well, as the mid-air evades do count as evades to help get it activated. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, Bubble Dance 2 is activated. And before I do forget, my Kinsect of choice, and you could pretty much use any Kinsect with Insect Glaive in this game, but as we do need to go over it, I do like using the Arc Maiden. Gets us blunt damage. It also has a Kinsect Powder of Blast as well. It has a Kinsect boost for Harvest Extract to get all of your extracts at once, or at least a few of them at a time. And we also have the Fast Charge Kinsect boost. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the MIZUTSUNE build for half of every weapon in Monster Hunter Wilds. Truth be told, I was running out of time a little bit, as I have been a little bit behind schedule, so I was only able to bring 7 MIZUTSUNE builds for you today, ladies and gentlemen. So if you would like to see more MIZUTSUNE builds, or maybe some Zoshia builds as well, we also do have Arc Tempered Ray Dow coming up, so please let me know what kind of weapon builds you want to see the most in Monster Hunter Wilds, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys watching the video so much, and I really did enjoy watching this one. The MIZUTSUNE update has been absolutely fantastic in this game, and I can't wait for Arc-Tempered Ray Dow. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. You'll be notified of any new guide or build content that I put out, but you'll also be notified of any live streams that I'm doing. From the day of the upload of this video, I'll actually be live streaming a Zoshia all-weapon solo challenge tomorrow, April 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So you can tune in and watch me solo Zoshia with every single weapon in Monster Hunter Wilds and probably learn a thing or two. But that's gonna do it for today, guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Terra. I'm signing off, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace! Get the frick out of my shot, dude!